Construction. Construction is an industry solely dependent upon effective communication between individuals, teams, and parties. Everything we do throughout the day could not be accomplished without some form of communication. Communication is a key element of daily living, and the construction process is no exception. George Bernard Shaw once said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." In construction, the importance of effective communication cannot be overstated. Communication is a process that involves transmitting a message on one end, while receiving and understanding that same message on the other. The message can be that of information, knowledge, process data, skills, or technology. If this process is followed correctly, positive outcomes will be the result, such as achieving coordinated results, managing change, motivating employees, understanding the needs of the workforce. On the contrary, poor communication or ineffective communication occurs when a transmitted message is not fully understood by the receiving party, but the party who transmitted the message assumes it was. In construction, a miscommunication can lead to costly problems for all parties. There are two types of communication, verbal and nonverbal. Let's discuss verbal communication. Verbal communication involves the use of words, both written and spoken, to relay a message. Under this type, we have oral communication, which includes face-to-face conversations, as well as telephone and radio conversations between two or more individuals. Oral communication in construction has several advantages, which include the use of nonverbal cues, as emotion can be easily expressed through speech by how it's spoken, and body language can further enhance the message. It saves time, as oral communication allows a more fluid dialogue compared to written communication, which requires a back-and-forth method. Oral communication is typically less formal, with open dialogues, and is restricted by a rigid format. Lastly, it can be confidential unless recorded. Oral communication has its disadvantages too. Since oral communication is highly dependent upon the speaking skills of the speaker and the listening skills of the recipient, poor speaking and listening skills could lead to misunderstandings or misinterpretations. Also, people tend to forget conversation details over time, which adds another disadvantage. Written communication in construction utilizes a variety of medias to present information in messages. Sure, they include medias that are common among businesses, such as correspondence letters, emails, transmittals, faxes, meeting minutes, text messages, and social media. But more specific types of communication to the construction process include requests for informations, or RFIs, proposal requests, change orders, daily reports, submittals, and web-based project management systems. In comparison to oral communication, written communication is much more structured, using a format, and usually is much more formal. Written communication obviously has its advantages and disadvantages. The benefits of this method in the construction environment are as follows. They provide a permanent record and can be used as evidence down the road. The chance of information being misunderstood is less likely, such that the message can be reread until it's understood. Also, the information in a message can be sent to all parties in a timely manner. Like oral communication, written communication has its disadvantages too. Providing a permanent record is both an advantage and a disadvantage. When preparing documents, it's important to be cautious about what is included in the permanent record. This concept is crucial to understand when working with contracted agreements. Also, some level of skill is required to effectively translate a message clear and concise for the other party to understand. Nonverbal communication uses methods that do not involve words, such as signals, drawings, and symbols. Signaling on site is a widely used method in the construction industry. It saves time by avoiding a phone conversation with another individual, and each signal has a specific meaning that employees are trained to understand before ever setting foot on the job site. Construction activities can be very loud, and using hand signals creates a safe work practice and clear understanding. Most construction projects use signage to communicate with the workforce and the public to further ensure everyone's safety. Contract drawings utilize both methods of verbal and nonverbal communication. Specifications and notes are expressed verbally with specific language and a clear understanding. For plans and drawings, they are expressed using imagery. For those who are not too familiar with the construction industry, contract drawings are not a set of instructions on how to build a project. They communicate what and where things go into place, but it is ultimately up to the construction force to establish their means, methods, and the sequence to construct what is in the plans. This type of communication is very unique to the construction industry because it requires skillful individuals to read, understand, and properly coordinate the numerous construction activities that it takes to complete a project. I had the opportunity to sit down with Ray Merver, a project engineer with Turner Construction.
It's weird to say, but not much is going to get built today without a cell phone or email connection, just because the sharing of knowledge is basically, if you think about it, the name of the game. You know, we had the analogy made in a meeting the other day by an owner who was kind of commenting on the efficiency of the architect. He was saying, you got this massive engine out here referring to the project, and you're only feeding it drops of gasoline. You're referring to knowledge that is communicated through the project team. So in order to keep that thing running, you got to keep feeding it new information. You got to keep getting the most current stuff out there, making sure, you know, if there's changes that they're relayed, if there's going to be a delay that, you know, the people who need to know about it. Ours is a unique product. There's nothing, no one's done this before. This exact aspect, you know, it's a dynamic in its nature. So everyone's kind of learning it, if you will. You could be the best drywall person in the world, but you've never built this project before. So in a sense, everyone is learning it as they go. Whereas in other industries, I think it's more like, say if you work at a bank, you know, you handle, the dollar amount is different, but you handle multiple transactions a day. Everyone is the same. Here, you're going to do the same activities that you're familiar with, but it's a completely different application of those same activities. I kind of use the analogy of, you know, if you're building a car in a factory, that's a very stamped process. You know, it goes from stage A to B to C without a whole lot of variance. Here, it follows a similar pattern, but it's not a concrete end result. Like, it's a little bit different. Like I said, this building hasn't been built before. It definitely helps if your project team's local. On this one, we don't have that luxury. If you could get everyone sitting around the same documents, the same information real time, you'll walk away with a whole lot better response than, you know, case in point, we had submittals come through that it results in 4 or 5 phone calls before I can finally finalize it and say, okay, this is good to go. Because, like, it'll, you know, a ceiling tile, for example, is a really good example of that. Contractor submitted it per specs at that time. Everything looked good. I forwarded it on to the architect. It comes back, 10 different review comments. In the time it had spent there, they had since issued a new set of drawings and changed all the tiles and all the sizes. So by the time it comes back, it's rejected, although when it was submitted, it's approved. So that resulted in a whole slew of phone calls, emails, to finalize, you know, what are we going to do as far as ceiling tile. And it ultimately ended up in an RFI where the design team reverted back. They're like, we'll just go with the base bid set. We're not going to tweak it. We're not going to change it. But, I mean, that took what could have been a simple couple clicks of the mouse to close it. Ended up taking, you know, 4 or 5 hours to finalize it. There's a weekly progress meeting every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Every trade who's on site is present at that. There's also owner-architect meetings, which is a lot of phone conferencing. Those are every Wednesday. And they discuss a lot of budget changes, things of that nature that don't necessarily always need to hit the field side. Those are discussed with a lot of the higher-ups. You know, like I said, owner, architect, we sit in on it. And then if the change affects the field, then it gets transferred over to the weekly progress meeting. And then there's also informal meetings. You know, Brian's office is a revolving door of people coming in and out, just needing to make sure they have the latest and greatest before they go and put it in. Once it's in concrete, it's a whole lot harder to change. You almost kind of tailor your communication to who your audience is. It'd be no different than if you're giving a presentation on communication. You know, you're not going to go in there and talk about math. You know, you're going to try to deliver to what you want people to know. That being said, you're not going to go in there and start dropping, you know, profanity when the owner's there. Subcontractor meetings are a little bit different. Those get a little bit more heated. Not that there's profanity all the time, but it's definitely different conversations for different audiences. So I would say, to summarize that one, just knowing the most effective way to communicate to your audience is probably the biggest challenge, but once you figure it out, it's got a lot of reward to it.
The bottom line is that the construction process would not happen without communication. Every member of the project team communicates at some time with another project team member, and as the project team member, it's very important to remember that others are relying on the information you provide. Whether during design or during construction, communication is most effective when the 4 C's are covered: clear, concise, complete, and correct. Each one should be considered if you are writing a letter, preparing an email, talking on the phone, or preparing a set of construction documents. Failure to do so can result in the message being misunderstood either partially or completely. How well you communicate has an impact on how you are perceived by others. Thus, a poor communicator will either have their message questioned or ignored completely, and the construction industry doesn't have time for this.